More than 34 million Americans have type 2 diabetes. That's 1 in 10 people with diabetes in the US. It's estimated that 17 million people in the US have long COVID. That's 1 in 20 Americans with long COVID. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as people all over the world are struggling with both diabetes and long COVID. Long COVID and diabetes don't stand a chance against the insights awaiting for you in this video. Today, I'm going to show you a surprising dietary technique that will help you, whether you're eating vegan, vegetarian, or autoimmune paleo, to reverse long COVID and to start reversing type 2 diabetes. Hello, and welcome to this growing community of people who are ready to heal their weird mystery symptoms that conventional medicine doesn't have answers for. I'm Carrie Bailey, your functional nutritionist. I work with people with anxiety, depression, and other weird mystery symptoms. And I guide my clients with food and lifestyle changes and use those as medicine. Let's jump into today's video. We're talking a lot about physiology today. So your body converts the foods that you make into 2 fuel sources. One is glucose and the other is ketones. Ketones are produced by your liver. If your liver is working great, then you get ketones. The other fuel source is glucose. Glucose is a simple sugar broken down from the foods that you eat and taken to the cells for energy. This glucose is what allows your cells to function, heal, grow, and thrive. So without it, you literally die. Glucose helps to build and sustain muscle. Glucose repairs damaged tissues and cells. Some organs require glucose to survive. The liver, red blood cells, white blood cells, the retina, the intestinal lining cannot survive on ketones. They have to have glucose. The ideal scenario is you eat food, that food's converted into glucose, the glucose gets in your bloodstream, and from the bloodstream, it gets into your cell. If you don't eat glucose, then your body has to find glucose from the storages in your body, in your liver, and in your muscles. So what happens when all the glucose is gone? What happens when you've been on keto or carnivore for a really long period of time? What happens is your body kicks in with some adrenaline because it says, hold on, there's an emergency. I don't have enough fuel. So it uses adrenaline to give you this emergency source of energy, which then starts also craving for sugar, right? When you have that adrenaline and you're craving for sugar, the sugar's there to calm it down. But the sugar's also, the call for sugar cravings is a call that your body needs glucose. This is likely going to increase your cravings for caffeine to drive additional adrenaline as a source of energy. Let's get a little bit into the digestive organs. Your pancreas, which is behind your stomach, is responsible for the digestive enzymes and for releasing insulin. What it does is it monitors your bloodstream. And when it sees glucose, it releases insulin. This insulin is like your cell's doorman. It is the butler. It holds the door open for the cell to receive the glucose. If there is excess glucose, that glucose gets stored in your liver if your liver is healthy. If your pancreas cannot create enough insulin, or if the cell cannot respond to the insulin, aka open the door for the glucose, that's what triggers what's called insulin resistance. The mechanism that causes this process is too much fat. So if the liver is stagnant, sluggish, dysfunctional, right, and it cannot release and store glucose properly, this leaves excess glucose in your bloodstream. Some of this glucose gets released through your kidneys, through your urine. When that happens, this might have symptoms like frequent urination, dehydration. And these are signs that, one, your liver's not working well, and it's also signs that you have too much fat in your diet. Some other early signs of type 2 diabetes are unusual thirst, dry eyes, dry mouth, blurry vision, unusual hunger, fatigue and irritability, digestive issues, and hypoglycemia. So when you're under a lot of stress, your adrenal glands are going to release more adrenaline, right? This is your emergency energy. And if you combine that with a high-fat diet, then your adrenal glands are releasing even more adrenaline, only that adrenaline is used to thin the fat from your blood, in your blood, so that fat can get to your brain and other places. All this extra adrenaline is really hard on your organs. And your organs are the parts of your body that keep you alive. Fat, and especially excess fat, wears down your liver, and it wears down your pancreas. Too much fat, even if it's really good fat, whether it's good fat or bad fat, all fat slows down your liver and limits its ability to store and release glucose the way it should. If your liver's strong and it spots that extra glucose in the system, it will grab that glucose and store it for a rainy day, for an emergency, for a car accident, for whenever it needs that glucose. If your liver is not functioning optimally, if it's sluggish and stagnant, or there's excess glucose it's trying to clean up, that's what leads to fatty liver. You know that episode of I Love Lucy when Lucy and Ethel get a job in the chocolate factory and their job is to wrap each piece of candy or chocolate, and the conveyor belt comes in and fine, it's going to right speed at first, and then over time it's just going faster and faster and faster, and they don't know what to do with it all, so they're shoving it down their shirts and shoving it down their pants or their skirt aprons. And so that's what your liver's doing with the fat, and that's what's leading to fatty liver. This excess fat gets dumped back into the bloodstream. This is what leads to hypoglycemia and prediabetes. If your fasting glucose is between 77 and 88, this is considered ideal. If your fasting glucose is lower than 77, that would put you in some kind of hypoglycemia state, meaning your blood sugar went too low. If your blood sugar is above 88, that's going to again put you in sort of a pre-diabetic state. This is a sign your liver, your pancreas, and your adrenal glands aren't working optimally. Another marker you can look at is your hemoglobin A1C. This is your average blood sugar over, say, a 2 or 3 month period. Ideally, we want this between 4.3% and 5.4%, although there are doctors, functional doctors like David Perlmutter, who wants your hemoglobin A1C to be closer to 5%, not 5.4%. The combination of diabetes and COVID, let's talk a little bit about that. Before COVID, you might be in a pre-diabetic state. You might not even know you were in a pre-diabetic state. What could have happened is COVID or long COVID could have triggered the acceleration of your journey into pre or full-blown diabetes. Or the increased viral load injured your liver during COVID, having other viruses at the same time. It could have injured your liver, your pancreas, and your adrenal glands. Or it could have been the perfect storm of a high-fat diet with impaired digestive organs. These processes are reversible. And the first step is grabbing a copy of my Anxiety and Depression Recovery Guide in the description and the comments below. There, you're going to get everything you need to get you started, and tips and tricks and recipes to get you started on the journey of healing. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about a client who came to me who was struggling with diabetes. She also had Hashimoto's, really wasn't eating poorly when you looked at her diet, but she couldn't figure it out. She could not get her hemoglobin A1C to come down below 6.9%, albeit trying to eat a clean, healthy diet. We did the thing that I'm about to show you. We did some food combining with her and reduced her fats, and that was the key to bring down her hemoglobin A1C from 6.9 to 5.7. So I'm going to teach you how to do that today. Donna Gates in her Body Ecology diet talks about food combining. Principles of Ayurveda talk about food combining. And it's the idea that certain foods should be eaten in combination with each other, and other foods should be avoided. It's not about what you're eating, but how you're eating. Today, most people are teaching to eat protein, fat, and fiber, and to use that combination. Even functional medicine is teaching you eat protein, fat, and fiber. But I have found that in some of my more tricky cases, this doesn't work. But the food combining does work. It is tricky. I will give you that. It's not something, if you wanted to eat out at a restaurant, is going to be virtually impossible. But if you're cooking for yourself and you're taking care of yourself, food combining will help you reduce your symptoms and reduce diabetes, reduce your symptoms of long COVID. The true cause of insulin resistance, the true mechanism that's making that happen, is combining sugars and fats. This is what leads to diabetes. This is what leads to cancer. This is what leads to long COVID symptoms. Before we start talking about the rules, let's really define what a fat is for the principles of food combining. We're going to talk about what fat is. We're going to talk about what sugars are. We're going to talk about sort of the rules around it, about the timing of your digestive system. And then we'll get into the combinations of foods to avoid and the combinations of foods that are ideal. Fats. Fats include the obvious fats like butter and olive oil, but there's other fats too that might not be so obvious to you. So you might be thinking, I'm going to eat a chicken breast with no skin, right? And I'm going to boil it in water, and that's going to be virtually no fat. Well, unfortunately, there is still fat in that. Some animal proteins are very high in fat and others are lean, but even the leanest ones would be considered fat for food combining. If you're eating animal protein, other foods you might be enjoying: eggs, dairy, nuts, seeds, and other oils. You might also be consuming nut butters, nut flours, olives, avocado, and coconut. Those are all fats. If you're vegetarian, you're likely eating dairy, eggs, nuts, seeds, and oils. Maybe the nut butters and nut flours too. If you're vegan, your sources of fat are going to be nuts, seeds, oils, avocado, coconut, olives. Dairy by nature is a combination of fat and sugar. There's always lactose in all forms of dairy. Butter and ghee are going to also have mostly fat, but there is going to be still some traces of lactose in there. Even if you were to take fat-free, zero skim milk, there's still some degree of fat in that. So that's why dairy has to come out completely, really, for this. Let's jump into the definition of sugars. What is a sugar? Grains. So you've got rice, corn, oats, wheat, millet, tortillas, bread. Anything processed is going to be a grain. You've got beans, your black beans, chickpeas. Most flours are going to have a starch to them, whether it's gluten, wheat flour, cassava, chickpea flour, rice flour, gluten-free flour, any kind of sorghum, and any of those types of blends are going to be a starch or a flour, a sugar. And then the most obvious ones: refined sugar, of course, honey, maple syrup, molasses, fruit. All fruit is considered a sugar. And then starchy vegetables. So your potatoes, sweet potatoes, and winter squash. Here's the rules. You want to eat fruit on an empty stomach. And that's why I usually suggest eating fruit at breakfast. You could eat fruit throughout the day if your lunch was fat-free, etc. Then you can snack on fruit throughout the day. You want to wait 1 hour after eating fruit before you bring any fat. The fruit, of all the foods, fruit digests the fastest. You want to eat that on an empty stomach first thing in the morning and let that digest and not eat any fat for an hour. Let's say you had animal protein for lunch and you wanted an apple. You would want to wait 3 to 4 hours before having that apple. So if you had your lunch at noon, you finished your lunch at noon, you wouldn't want to have that apple until 3 or 4. But by then, hopefully that's enough time to wait till your animal fat is through the digestive system, and then the apple would be okay. It really just depends on your liver. I like to look at across the day and really think about meals and planning to figure out when you can eat sugars and when you can eat fat. You might do no fat until lunch. That's one way to start, right? And then you can eat fruit for breakfast, grains for breakfast, everything, and up until noon. And then at noon, you would switch and not eat any sugar until several hours, and then also eating your dinner. If there's enough time between your lunch and dinner, you could have a piece of fruit. After that, if you're ready to progress, you could do a fat-free breakfast and a fat-free lunch. This gives you a lot more room to be able to really eat when you're hungry. So in previous videos, I've talked about where you might need to eat every hour and you might need to graze to get that glucose in your system. And so if you do that, the ideal way to do it is no fat for breakfast, no fat for lunch. Then you can eat an apple every hour if you needed to, or a banana, or whatever you need to bring up your energy to get your glucose back in the system. Let's say that you had a fat-free breakfast and a fat-free lunch, but you had dinner with fat and you wanted, again, to have some kind of fruit or a dessert after dinner. You would actually want to wait. If it was a sugar, you'd want to wait until at least 3 or 4 hours. So let's say if you had dinner at 5 o'clock, then you could have that apple at 9 o'clock. Now, the other option is you can get creative. There's ways of doing desserts where you're making something with stevia, monk fruit, and erythritol. That would be another option, is if you wanted a dessert and you wanted to have fat, is to come up with some other sweet taste that doesn't have sugar. Think about things that are basically like zero glycemic, which is like stevia, monk fruit, and erythritol. You want to wait an hour after eating a sugar, a fruit, before you bring any fat in the system. I don't know that grains digest as fast as fruits. Fruits do digest fat, but grains might be slower. And again, if you've eaten fat, you want to wait 3 to 4 hours before you put another sugar before you eat a sugar. Let's describe some of the combinations that we want to avoid and the combinations that are going to be most well known for leading to diabetes or leading to some of the symptoms of long COVID. But let's take a piece of cake, for instance. A cake would have flour and sugar. Those are here in the sugar section. And then it would have sometimes eggs and butter or some kind of oil, right? So those are the two by nature. A cake would be the bad combination. Sorry, I don't want to say good or bad, but you know what I mean. Cookies. So cookies, some kind of flour and sugar. Then you're going to also have some kind of fat or eggs or things like that. Donuts, sugar and flour, and then fried in oil, and then covered with more sugar. And then ice cream. Ice cream by nature, if you're talking about dairy ice cream, is going to be by nature the combination. But generally, when you make ice cream, you put sugar with cream. Those two don't go together. And you'll notice too that these are the foods usually you crave. That's what I've noticed is if I used to crave ice cream all the time. All right, burgers and fries. Fries, whether it's potatoes, a sweet potato, it's going to be a starch. On the burger itself, if you eat a burger with a bun and the meat and the cheese, it's like the perfect mix of foods to avoid. Mac and cheese, got a grain. You've got cheese, you've got chicken and rice, seemingly innocent. You don't want to combine those. Any kind of meat and potatoes. If you're really bougie or you have a charcuterie board, you might have prosciutto wrapped date or prosciutto wrapped melon. Again, those are, even though they seem tasty and healthy, you want to avoid those. And then any kind of chip. If you go down the chip section, I guarantee you will not find anything where it's not a fried starch or fried sugar of some sort. Potatoes, a cassava chip, plantain chips, chickpea flour, like so many things. It's the combination of the two. And again, probably the thing that we likely crave. Here's some combinations that are good. Let's get to the good part. Like, Carrie, tell me what I can eat. So animal protein and non-starchy vegetables. Chicken and asparagus. This is your salmon and your kale. This is your steak and your zucchini. On its own, fruit is beautiful. Rice and beans cooked without oil. That's a good combination. You've got your grains and your starch. No fat, supposedly the perfect protein. You can put together starchy and non-starchy vegetables. Maybe you do a curry with potatoes and Brussels sprouts. Again, the curry would be sauce that didn't have any fat. Most lettuce-based salads are good with a non-starchy vegetable. That's usually what I guide my clients when they're like, Carrie, I want to go out to eat at this restaurant. What can I choose? Usually salads are safe, and then asking for olive oil or something, or you could put animal protein, things like that. So there's most restaurants you can do that. And lastly, this is my new favorite. I'm hungry. What can I eat right now that's going to satiate me? It's potatoes or sweet potatoes and salsa or marinara. Kind of make even like a potato pizza kind of thing out of that. So that combination is good. Now make sure that if you're not making your marinara, that marinara doesn't have olive oil, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to have olive oil, but there are fat-free marinaras out there. All right. Well, that's it for today. Give me a thumbs up if you appreciate this information. Subscribe to my channel so you can see more of my videos each week. To recap, your body needs glucose to survive. You cannot live well on ketones alone. They might, again, cut down your symptoms because that's the reason why keto and carnivore work, is because you're taking out all the sugar. So you're not even worried about combining sugar and fat. If you have symptoms, your liver is likely not working optimally. I've covered how it's the combination of fat and sugar that leads to insulin resistance and diabetes. We covered the functional glucose and hemoglobin A1C levels in your blood work. And lastly, and most importantly, we went over the foods and how to combine foods, to use food combining to improve your symptoms and to reverse both long COVID symptoms and type 2 diabetes symptoms. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.